You know, when we think of monsters, we usually think of make-believe things, stuff that goes bump in the night. But some of the scariest stories out there, they're the real ones. Tonight, we're going to talk about a Halloween where the monster wasn't in a costume. He was the one holding his son's hand.
It's a pretty chilling question, right? For one family in Deer Park, Texas, this wasn't just some spooky thought experiment. It became their absolute, devastating reality.
So this story starts with literally every parent's worst nightmare. 8-year-old Timothy O'Brien is dead, just hours after getting home from a night of trick-or-treating. And the cause of death was something nobody could believe: cyanide poisoning from his Halloween candy.
As you can imagine, total panic just ripped through the community. Parents were grabbing candy away from their kids, and police were telling everyone, turn in your Halloween bags, just desperate to find where the poison came from and stop another tragedy. Okay, so to really understand what happened, we have to rewind just a few hours. It's October 31st, 1974. There's a little bit of rain, but that Halloween excitement is definitely in the air. And a father is taking his kids out for a classic night of trick-or-treating. The guy leading this little group is Ronald O'Brien, and by all accounts, this man is a pillar of his community. He's an optician, a church deacon, he even sings in the choir. So he's out with his son Timothy, his daughter Elizabeth, and a neighbor with his 2 kids. On the surface, it's just a perfect picture of small-town life. So here's how the night goes down. The group decides to hit a wealthier neighborhood, hoping for the good candy. They get to this one house, and it's completely dark, no lights on. The kids get bored and run ahead to the next house. But Ronald, he stays behind. A few moments later, he catches up to them, and he's holding 5 huge 21-inch Pixy Stix. He says someone finally answered the door. By 9:30 that night, after eating just one of those treats, his son Timothy is dead. Investigators immediately, and I mean immediately, zeroed in on those 5 Pixy Stix. They knew these things were the key to figuring out what happened to Timothy, and more importantly, who was responsible.
5 of them. Not 1, but 5 giant 21-inch Pixy Stix. Ronald's story was that some silent person from that dark house just handed all of them over. I mean, think about that. That's a really specific and generous treat, right? And it's about to become the centerpiece of this entire investigation.
And what is just so terrifying here is how close this came to being a much, much bigger tragedy. See, Ronald didn't just give the poison candy to his son. He gave one to his daughter, 2 to the neighbor's kids, and later that night, he even handed the last one to a boy from his church. 4 other children were walking around with a lethal dose of cyanide. Thank God, none of them made it. Now, back at home, the details get almost unbearable to think about. Timothy, all excited for his candy, is having trouble getting the powder out of that giant tube. So his father, Ronald, steps in to help. He starts shaking the poison powder directly into his son's mouth. When Timothy complains that it tastes bitter and nasty, Ronald just gives him some Kool-Aid to wash it all down. During the investigation, the police found the smoking gun. The tops of those Pixy Stix, they weren't factory sealed. They had been clumsily opened, filled with cyanide, and then just stapled shut. It was sloppy, but it was absolute proof that the candy had been tampered with.
So with this new evidence, the police turned their attention right back to the only witness of this mysterious candy handoff, Ronald O'Brien himself. And, well, his story started to fall apart very, very quickly.
The first huge red flag was his memory. When the police asked Ronald to show them the house, he led them on this long, winding walk through the neighborhood for over half an hour before finally saying he just couldn't remember which one it was. To the investigators, this was way more than just suspicious. It was unbelievable. And his description of the person who gave him the candy? Oh, it was just as vague. He claimed the door only opened a tiny crack and a hand, a hairy arm, reached out and gave him the Pixy Stix. No face, no voice, 0 details. It sounded less like a memory and more like a really poorly made-up lie. Let's just put his claims right next to the facts, because the whole story just crumbles. He was the only one who stayed behind at that dark house. He was the only person who saw this mysterious hairy arm, and he was the one who introduced the poisoned candy to the entire group. It just didn't add up. So the investigation was quickly closing in on a truly horrifying conclusion. The monster wasn't some random stranger lurking in a dark house. No, the monster was wearing the mask of a loving father and a respected member of the community.
I mean, this was a man people looked up to and trusted, a church deacon, a choir singer, a leader who was in charge of the local bus program. He had built this whole public image of respectability that made the truth of what he did almost impossible to even comprehend.
When you look at the chain of events, every single suspicious action was taken by Ronald, staying behind at the house, coming back with tampered candy, passing it out to 5 different kids, and the most damning part of all, physically helping his own son eat the poison. All the signs pointed to him, and only him.
Ronald O'Brien was convicted and sentenced to death, earning him the awful nickname, the Candyman Killer. The prosecution argued his motive was just simple, cold-hearted greed. He'd taken out life insurance policies on his children. But that still leaves us with this haunting question. What kind of darkness drives a father, the one person who is supposed to protect his child, to commit such an unthinkable act? And that's a question that chills you to the bone, long after the Halloween decorations are put away.